Yeah, hi there. It's Graham Healy or Master G, answering some questions and answers or Q&A with Yun Jung Do, or what style of training we're doing. And a question comes up to me relatively, well, not that often, but relatively often, is how do you train in a martial art when you advertise non-contact and non-competition? And I'll answer that question quite easily, actually. So as some of you, and maybe some of you don't know, my background is actually in boxing, and my father was Queensland State Champion 1948, Bert Healy, and my grandfather was a professional boxing trainer. My best mate in the boxing days was Neil Patel, who held 3 professional boxing titles in Australia, lightweight, I think, welterweight and light middleweight. And I was the main sparring partner for most of the Queensland State Champions with Reggie Kirkham in NFC, as well as being in my grandfather's boxing gym. Now, and you know, I had a limited amateur career, but I did, as an amateur, fight professional fighters, or actually a professional fighter, a ring in that they tried to bring in to try and give me a hiding, but it didn't work out that way, did it? So the reason why I told you that is I understand what full contact competition is all about now. That was back when I was 19. And after that, of course, I then joined Taekwondo, initially under Chongchul Ri, and then I joined International Taekwondo Federation under Grandmaster Yun. And then Grandmaster Yun asked me personally to be one of his founding instructors for Yun Jung Do, which I did. And as most of you know, and then for about 30 years, I developed my own style and system, which was an integrated system. And then I rejoined with the Grandmaster Yun about 5 to 6 years ago now, and to build the second generation of Yun Jung Do. Now, answering that question, you know, how can you do a martial art if it's non-contact and non-competition? Because you see most of the people I see either on the internet or many of the clubs, they're all talking about, do you compete? Do you compete? Well, it is not necessary. This is, in my experience, where I have been a competitor, as I've just described, it is not necessary for people to be a competitor in full contact sports to actually learn the skills and drills. So what I do, and what the policy basically with Yun Jung Do, and generally with what I teach in any dimension, be it boxing skills and drills, or even the integrated combat solution skills and drills, which was the original Commando Krav Maga training that I established here in 2007 with Monty Isaac. I'm a sort of teacher type. So I've done 6 years of medical science at university. So my forte is teaching people the technique and the detail and the anatomy and the physiology and what it means and where the pressure points are and all that sort of stuff. So this is a quick version. In the real world, now I've trained police, I've trained prison wardens, and I've trained you know, some army personnel, and the people have been associated with it, not either you know, bouncing or in the police force, or they could be just you know, training for self-defense, I suppose. But I've gone down the area where I have trained the guys who are in the front line, And generally speaking, in my experience, there's not too many of them that know a great deal. I mean, for instance, in the police force, okay, you wind up with you get licensed with a gun and tasers and all this sort of stuff. In the army, you've got licensed weapons and all this. So the need for man-to-man combat's fairly limited, depending on what you're doing and where you're at. However, what I find is that rough enough is not good enough in the technical side of teaching people self-defense. So answering the question, do you need to do full contact to learn self-defense? And the short answer is no. But to clarify that, I'm not saying you don't do contact. You do contact on, say, punching bags, focus mitts, focus shields, but you're not using your training partner as a punching bag. So my father always said that never let anyone use you as a punching bag, right? And I never did. And he never did. And in those days when Dad was like, he was the head boxing trainer at the NFC, I think it was Natural Fitness Club. And he was also the gymnastics coach. But he had after he won the Queensland title, he had a few guys that came into the boxing gym wanting to challenge Graham Healy. And in one occasion, just as an example, on one occasion, Dad was like about 9.5 stone. He was like a featherweight. And one guy came into the gym to challenge Dad just out of the blue. And Dad was training his guys. And he said, well, just, wait for a while. He was just sussing him out. And then they put the gloves on. He said, okay, put the gloves on. And Dad just knocked him out, one hit. In actual fact, he did worse than that, unfortunately. He said he hit him with the chipping right and split his eye from here right across there. They put about 12 stitches in the eye. Now, he didn't want to do that, but he knew that the mug, we call them mugs in boxing, that come in and want to challenge you, you've got to take care of them very quickly. You've got to basically knock them out or, stun them. So, that level of strike power is a different ball game altogether. So when we talk competition, there's a certain parameter for so-called competition. For instance, when I left boxing and went into, I was 7 years, I wound up being a senior instructor with Chongchul Ri, and their methodology was so-called non-contact sparring. Wasn't contact to the face, but certainly some of the guys got carried away to the midsection and ribs and all this sort of stuff, where they didn't understand what the level of contact was. It was supposed to be maybe, moderate to the midsection, what have you, but it depends on who you were sparring. And to me, as a boxer, in those days, with the so-called non-contact sparring, each person, you didn't know who you're going to deal with next, because you had to maybe give them some, as the old Grandmaster Chongchul Ri would say, give them the Korean hot chilies if they played up. But, as I say, being a former boxer, well, I still do boxing training now, but being trained in boxing, I just look, in our gym, in Reggie Kirkham's gym in Townsville, we never went out to hurt each other in the boxing. When you got in the boxing ring, that was different. I mean, it's basically you're trying to knock out the opponent or win in points. But in the sparring gym, it was all skills and drills. And that level, as I say to my students, in Yun Jung Do, we're doing skills and drills. We're not competing, and I'm not trying to hurt any student at all. Zero, zip. it doesn't take much with martial art training to hurt someone, because you're taking all what you do to a different level. So I'll just give you a little bit of an example. My good friend Neil Padler was 3 times Australia professional boxing champion. He's a good example because when he was a 15-round fighter and fought professionally all over Australia, even fought some of the great Aboriginal fighters. One in particular, I'll think of his name in a second, but the one who fought Robert Duran and actually broke Robert Duran's ribs. So those people in boxing who know Robert Duran, hands of stone, who fought Sugar Ray Leonard several times, was one of the greatest fighters in the world. And I'll think of this Aboriginal fighter's name in a second, but Neil fought this Australian Aboriginal fighter twice. He got beaten by him once, and then Neil beat this fighter the second time. But the power of those professional fighters, as versus the amateur ranks, the hitting power level goes up about 30% to 50%. So they hit that damn hard. It's pretty. It's not many people want to get hit in the head like as in boxing. I'll tell you that now. So that's why I'm saying for Yun Jung Do, that's one of the reasons why we don't advertise competition, and we don't advertise full contact or anything like that. Non-contact, no competition. And I've had a few guys ask me, well, how can that happen? How can you learn any confidence and all this? Well, this is what happens. You learn the skills and drills. Like in my class, I still teach the boxing technique from me as per the Healy Boxing Academy system. I was supposed to be just like in the boxing days, we'd have people who'd come to the boxing gym. They didn't want to go into any fighting. They just wanted to learn the skills and drills. They wanted bag work. They might do a little bit of light sparring and all that. No, in the sparring, there's never, even in my boxing days, in the sparring, there was never intention in your gym to hurt anyone. It was all about skills and drills. So I take that principle and apply it into Yun Jung Do with the kicking and the Yun Jung Do techniques, where you can develop your power on the punching bags, the focus mitts, and and in the air, your sharpness in the air, sharp and focus. And then in the real world, it should be just 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So when I say 1, 2, 3, I mean left, right, left hook, left, right, half turning kick. It should be, flick and side kick. It might be side kick, back kick. It might be low section kick to the knee, the Bruce Lee thing. So when you take a person who's been very well skilled and drilled, as an example, my father spent 2 years, 6 days a week in the boxing gym before he had his first fight, right? And he only had 13 fights for the title, and he was fighting guys who had over 200 fights, blah blah blah. So the principle is, the foundation is extremely important, the most important. So even in the area of competition, if you have a professional fighter who goes into the ring without proper foundations, he'll just get slaughtered. Yeah. And in the ring isn't anywhere to learn your foundational work. It's actually in the gym. It's a bit like Mike Tyson's trainer, Gus. Gus is not Gus Mercurio, but Gus, I think of his first name anyway. You can look him up on the web. When you never really saw much of how Tyson was actually taught by his famous old boxing trainer. These days, it's coming out a bit. You see the peekaboo system that he used, and for the short, thick set guys, it's very good. It's a bit like Smoking Joe Fraser, and myself and Dad had met Smoking Joe actually. So that sort of build a fighter, that short, thick set guys, that peekaboo style of fighting works very well. But as even though Tyson was a bit of a bad boy, certainly was a bad boy in his day, but he was a very good defensive fighter. So he would move around the guard and hit him with those hooks from underneath. And a lot of the fighters that I saw really didn't have much defense, and certainly didn't have much defense against Mike Tyson, because he was taught by his old boxing trainer to be a #1 defensive fighter. See, Tyson never got hit that much when you have a look at it. He did later on in his career when he slowed down, but early in his career, he just completely wiped him out. Now, you take, now that style of boxing, I don't teach that style of boxing. My style of boxing is more like Lennox Lewis, the orthodox British style of boxing, big straight punches. Lennox Lewis or Vladimir Klitschko, that style of boxing. And you take that sort of style and you just take the skills and drills out of it without going into competition. So then have a look at, now we have a look at, say, Grandmaster Yun. The Grandmaster Yun's kicking ability and striking ability, second to none. At 82 is still the same. If you get hit with a side kick from Grandmaster Yun or any of what I call the original Taekwondo masters or even the Japanese masters, you're finished. It's one-hit strikes. So in the real world, what I'm saying is, in the real world, the development of the one-hit strike is where it's all at. Now, I'm not saying that one hit's going to finish a conflict, but you've got to develop the power and the mentality of one-hit striking. So 1, 2, 3, I'll call it, right? So when you do that, I suppose I'll go back to the analogy with Neil Patel, right? When he was a 15-round fighter, he had to train for the endurance to last that 15 rounds, right? So there was a parameter on his fighting that he had to make the 15 rounds if he didn't knock out the opponent, right, in boxing. So you had to put a big endurance factor in with your boxing skills. And like Muhammad Ali, if you weren't conditioned to last that 15 rounds, you would fade very early in the piece. It's a bit like when Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman. George Foreman was all about getting rid of you in about 5 rounds, and Ali knew that, and he played the rope-a-dope and tired him out, and eventually got him on the over-the-shoulder right cross. Now, that principle of dropping down the, let's say, 15 rounds, you bring it down to 5 rounds, and then the explosive power factor goes right up. Now, you take the 5 rounds and then you reduce it down to 1 round. Then you take that 1 round and you might reduce that down, instead of 3 minutes, you might take it down to 1.5 minutes, that you've got to finish them in 1.5 minutes. Now, that's real self-defense. Now, we'll be a bit flexible. I'd say, you need at least 3 to 5 minutes, say 5 minutes, which is almost 2 rounds in boxing. So if you were to reduce the conflict down, but the intensity goes up, so the conflict time goes down, but the intensity goes up. Now, that's the principle of what I call classic, the old style martial art master training. You know, the guys would be, you know, hitting the Makalama board. Their focus is to finish the conflict ASAP. Like, for instance, like on the website on www.yunjungdo-healy.com, you'll see on the front page there, I've got the Korean Tiger Division. Well, the Tiger Division was famous or infamous where they were involved in the Vietnam War. Now, all the Tiger Division were Korean ITF black belt / master black belts, at least black belts, but their black belts were trained in one-hit striking. So they, in the conflict, as you'll read on the website, that quite often they didn't even need their weapons when they you know, took out the Viet Cong. They just took them out barehanded, basically. And that's, you know, kicks and strikes. So that's what I'm talking about without sounding too violent. That's the level I'm talking about when you're talking about non-contact, non-competition, right? So you can train someone to that level. Say you've got a student and you take them up to the black belt level or the grey belt level in our case, and then they are dedicated in bag work, and they're dedicated in accurate kicking, and they're dedicated in the power strikes. And in the real world, that's what you need. So I'm not putting competitions down. I've done it myself. But what I'm saying is that when you do competitions, what you do is you tailor your training to that competition, be it whatever rounds, and then you've got to put the endurance factor in. But in the real world, you have to, if there's a self-defense situation, you've got to finish it as quick as possible, or do a runner, preferably do a runner. But if it's, you've got to finish it ASAP. So that style of mentality in training is the mindset of Yun Jung Do, right? Okay, that's the mindset of Grandmaster Yun. He's old school, il pok pil sal, one hit must finish them. So if you focus that way, then in a real situation, that's what you do. Now, I'm not blowing any trumpets for myself, but yeah, you know, I've been in quite a few real situations, including armed assault on me, which made front page of the news. You can read about that on the UnJungDoHealy.com front page. And I'm telling you, coming from a situation where I have been in life-threatening situations and the assailant with guns, plural, you can't hold back, and it's either you or him. And that mentality is totally different from any competition stuff. It's no referee, one of his could be in the morgue. So from that perspective, and I don't want to go down this line too much, but all I'm saying to those who ask me the question, how can you be non-contact, non-competition? Well, my answer is, well, we're non-contact for our training partners, but you compete within yourself, but you're continually refining the samurai sword within. And that means you do the work on the bags, you do the work on the shields and focus mitts and all that sort of stuff. You do your technique work, plus with that sort of mentality, you must have a very strong moral etiquette and moral, let's say moral makeup. It's character building. And see, for this sort of level, as I say, a level where if you do something, you could perhaps cause serious damage, you've got to understand the legalities of that. And you've got to understand what in Australia, certainly, It's called Proportionate Response. It's Criminal Code 1888. And that means if you're in a self-defense situation, basically legally what you can do is just neutralize them without going over the top. If you go over the top, you're not in the Middle East, you're not in Israel, you're not in some godforsaken place where there's no law at all, where you're not in Australia, put it that way. I'm talking about in Australia now. And morally in any other country, usually it's all about proportionate response. So if you act, my advice, if you act according to your conscience, your inner voice, what your inner voice says, provided you've got the skills, then you usually will think of proportionate responses. If I've struck someone in self-defense, do I need to do it again, or is he being neutralized? Now, I've done that a lot of times, actually, where people have confronted me and they've been taken out with one well-placed strike, and they didn't want to do anything again after that, I assure you. So the thing is, I think at the end of the day, regarding, non-contact and no competition, depends who's training you, right? So if, like myself or someone else who's actually had a real life experience, if they're training you, then their experience gets transferred onto you, and you do not have to go through the pain and misery, say, like I had to go through with the full contact boxing and everything else like that. So I used to love training. I didn't like fighting. Never. I still don't like fighting at all. And I only have had these conflicts because they've come to me, not me to them. And so that's, if that question's answered, I hope it's answered properly. So in Yun Jung Do, basically we're focused on, the other thing I was going to say is this: if you don't have competition and you don't have contact on training partners, the whole attitude between people's different. It's friendly. It's like you're not trying to hurt people. You're trying to learn. So I like to have an atmosphere of learning, and people shouldn't feel fearful. Like one of my senior students came to me, and the reason why he came to me in Yun Jung Do anyhow is that his friends were doing some form of full contact or contact taekwondo or whatever they were doing, and they'd come home bruised and battered every night, and they'd go to training. Now, these guys have all got jobs. They're older than 20, they're in the 30s, 40s, 50s, young family. They don't need a crucial ligament snapped at training, and then they're basically buggered for their job. So they don't need any of that. So in my school, that's why people come to me, as they realise, okay, Graham Healy's got a lot of experience in various areas, but he's teaching us how to do stuff. And he's showing us through his experience, or whoever the trainer is. It all goes back to the trainer. So, don't assume, always have a look at the instructor's background. Who is he? Who was he taught by? Who was his master? What was his boxing background? Whatever he's teaching, who taught him and for how long? And was he taught full time? Was he a professional instructor? You've got to ask these questions. Because I'll put it this way, every mug out there is now an expert overnight. And you've got to be very careful what you're being taught, because a lot of the stuff you get taught is only going to get you into trouble, actually, right? And I could go down that road, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so I hope that helps. The answer is, when I get asked a question, how can you defend yourself if you're doing non-contact and no competition? I remember one guy at one of these meetings we went to, it was a bouncer or something. He asked me that question, and I said to him, I said, how many professional fights you have? Well, how many fights you have? That's what? Hotel, at the door, Brunts. Oh, I said, well, how many techniques did you use to neutralize the drunks? Oh, he said, one or two. And I said, that's right, one or two. You know, if you can't do it in one or two, go back to the drawing board and do some more training. The Grandmaster used to be able to break 6 tiles with his fingertips. Now, you could imagine. I just want you to reflect on his old school, him, all the Taekwondo originals. They were devastating, but they focused on one-hit strikes. So if it was serious business, they'd take you out. Now, I don't want to focus on that because we're more into peace and harmony for Yun Jung Do. But that's why we've removed the competition part, because, you know, look, some young people do like competition. And, you know, but in my book, I don't want, you know, any of my kids being kicked in the head for fun, because I've had guys defend themselves in real situations, and kick people in the head and break their jaw and all sorts of stuff, in self-defense. So, you know, even with spinning kicks, you know, if someone gets hit in the head with a spinning kick, a proper, full-on, full power spinning kick, I mean, it could kill you. So I don't see how that's some form of entertainment or sport. You know, you can put as many helmets on as you like, proper spinning heel kick done, or a proper side kick can do some serious damage. So, you know, most people don't want that. So when we're teaching Yun Jung Do, all the shield work, all the pad work, all the technical side of it, and it's just there in case you need it. We're not teaching you to be the next world champion. If you want to do that, go and join a kickboxing club or an MMA club or something like that, and good luck, and hope you survive the injuries. But that's not the majority of people. The majority of people just want to do the stretching. They want to do the benefit of, you know, martial art training without getting hurt. And that's what we provide with Yun Jung Do. So that's the answer to how do you teach people without competition and, you know, without contact. And the contact isn't on the person. So I hope that helps. Graham Healy, or Master G, as some people call me. And that's it. So any more questions, let me know, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much.